What if I told you that the world's first neuroscientists weren't scientists at all? What if they were mystics who, centuries ago, managed to draw a super detailed map of the human mind without ever having the tools to actually look inside a brain? Well, that's the hidden code we're about to crack open.
So let's just ask it straight up. Is it possible that ancient mystics, sages, philosophers, poets, somehow created a functional map of the human brain without ever cracking open a skull? I know, it sounds kind of crazy, but the evidence, well, it's pretty stunning.
So, for centuries, you had these three incredible civilizations: Persia, India, and China. They're all separated by huge deserts, massive mountain ranges, and yet they all embarked on the exact same journey. But they weren't charting oceans or new continents. They were mapping the inner landscape of our own consciousness.
All right, so let's take a look at these three ancient maps. Let's see what these amazing cultures actually found on their completely independent deep dives into the mind. Okay, so in Persia, you had traditions like Sufism that were totally obsessed with this idea of inner light and a kind of direct, intuitive knowing. Meanwhile, way over in India, thinkers were meticulously charting the step-by-step path from all the chaotic noise in our heads to a state of perfect, non-dual unity. And then in China, you had Taoist masters who were all about achieving this deep stillness and clarity, a kind of harmony with the way things are, which they called the Tao.
And here's where it gets really wild. These civilizations, they barely had any contact, especially not about these deep inner states. They were using totally different languages, completely different metaphors. And yet, when you lay their maps side by side, they describe the same inner continent, the same mountains, the same valleys. How is that even possible?
Well, to answer that, we're going to need a translator, a kind of modern key that lets us read all these ancient maps in one single unified language. And believe it or not, that key actually comes from modern neuroscience.
So let me introduce you to our Rosetta Stone, the Brain Kinematics Model, or just BKM. Now, don't let the fancy name scare you off. The main idea is actually really simple. It sees consciousness not as just one thing, but as a kind of ladder of different states. And each step on that ladder is defined by the brain's energy patterns and just how well different parts of the brain are working together in harmony. And this ladder right here explains it perfectly. We start at the bottom with just raw sensory stuff coming in. Then we move up into the world of feeling. Higher up, that's where intuition pops up. That gut feeling of just knowing something. Above that is illumination, a state of just pure, crystal clear awareness. From there, we get to our everyday logical thinking, and right at the very top, that's where we find what the ancients were all pointing to, these incredible states of unity or superconsciousness. So, here's the kicker. What happens when we use this modern, scientific BKM ladder to look at those three ancient maps? Well, the result is absolutely mind-blowing. They just snap together perfectly.
Okay, so the first huge point of agreement is something you see in all three of these traditions. They all use the metaphor of light to describe a state of pure, clear awareness. Now check this out. This is what's so cool. The Persians called it ishraq, which means illumination. In India, they talked about sit, or jyoti, which is like an inner awareness light. And in China, they called it ming, or inner brightness. I mean, come on. 3 different cultures, 3 different words, all pointing to the exact same rung on the BKM ladder, the state of illumination, a brain state of high harmony and pure awareness.
Okay, the next layer where they all agree is, well, it's even more radical. All 3 of these traditions said that direct intuitive insight is actually a higher and more trustworthy way of knowing than our everyday logical mind.
And just look at how this lines up. The Persian idea of knowledge by presence, the Indian concept of jnana, or direct knowing, and the Chinese concept of wu, that sudden flash of insight, they're all describing the same fundamental brain state, that moment of knowing before you think, which the BKM calls intuition. They all figured out that there's a deeper truth you can tap into before the logic machine gets going.
And finally, we get to the summit, the absolute peak, the ultimate destination that all 3 of these spiritual roadmaps were pointing to, a transcendent state of oneness, where your sense of being a separate person just dissolves into something much, much bigger.
This was the grand finale of their maps. The Persian Sufis called it the unity of being. In India, they called it Advaita, or non-duality, not two. And the Taoist sages were trying to find unity with the Tao. So where does our modern brain kinematics model put this state? Right at the very top, superconsciousness, a state of maximum neural harmony and integration, It's a perfect match.
Okay, so now that we've seen these incredible overlaps, let's zoom in a little bit on a few of the key steps on this journey. Because the ancients weren't just describing these states, they were describing how to get from one to the next.
This quote right here, this is the whole key to understanding how it all works. It just beautifully lays out the difference between three stages we get confused about all the time: feeling, intuition, and illumination.
Let's really break this down, because it's like a mini roadmap. At the level of feeling, you've got a lot of emotional energy, but it's all over the place. It's unstructured. Think about it. This is when you know how you feel, like angry or happy, but you have no idea why. Then, as that energy starts to settle down and form a pattern, you get to intuition. That's the aha moment, right? The gut feeling where some kind of meaning just shows up, no logic needed. But illumination, that's a whole other level. It's a state of high neural harmony with almost no mental noise. It's not an emotion or an insight. It's just the feeling of pure, clear, steady presence.
So, what does this all mean when you put it all together? Well, what we're really looking at is a single, unified story of human consciousness just told in 3 different ancient languages.
And this right here might be the most important takeaway. These ancient maps, they weren't just abstract ideas to think about. They were practical, repeatable instructions for self-development. A guide for how to actually develop our own consciousness from a state of chaotic feeling to one of illuminated unity. So, why does any of this matter to you and me today? Because it tells us that the basic structure of our own consciousness is universal. It shows that ancient wisdom can actually be validated by modern science, which builds this incredible bridge between those two worlds. And, maybe most powerfully, it suggests that our consciousness isn't set in stone. It's not fixed. It can be trained, it can be refined, it can be developed. These ancient traditions didn't just describe the territory, they actually gave us a map to navigate it ourselves.
Which, of course, leaves us with one final, very personal question. If these ancient sages were right, and our inner world is this vast landscape just waiting to be explored, if consciousness really is a journey, where on the map are you?